The room holds its breath. Dust lies in a pale, undisturbed sheet over the cold floorboards, softening the edges of what once mattered. Faint light leaks through warped blinds, slicing the air into thin ribbons. Every surface carries the stillness of a held memory. This place has not been touched in years, yet its silence feels alert, almost aware. In the dim haze, the faint outline of long-forgotten tape marks the shape where a life once ended. The air carries the thin, metallic scent of chilled wood and old paint. Time has not moved here, it simply waits. It is here, in this abandoned house outside Crestwood Valley, Washington, that the file begins. October 17, 1988, the day Mariel Caden, 27, a junior architect with a fascination for restoring historical structures, was found lying near the foot of her drafting table. No struggle noted, no nearby signs of forced entry, no clear motive. A single overturned chair remained the only disruption in an otherwise undisturbed room. Her workspace sketches pinned neatly to the wall, rulers aligned in a straight line, pencils sharpened to perfect points, seemed to mourn her absence. The investigator at the time, Ethan Hale, noted in his earliest entry, scene controlled, victim peaceful in posture, no immediate direction of inquiry. The lack of answers pressed on the community like a cold fog. A promising young woman, known for calm focus and near-obsessive attention to her projects, had fallen in the quiet of her own studio without reason. The case never moved. Not for lack of interest, the town felt the loss deeply, but for lack of traction. The file contained clean pages, neat notes, and an absence of anything that pushed the story forward. It was the stillest kind of mystery, one without motion. Now, decades later, Hale steps back inside the same room. The door's soft creak echoes as if reluctant to disturb the air. He moves slowly, careful not to wake the past too quickly. Every object feels like a fragile reminder of what slipped through his hands. He kneels near the faded tape outline, gazing at the faint impression of dust where her body once rested. A breath escapes him, not dramatic, not emotional, just a quiet exhale shaped by years of professional restraint and a residue of unanswered responsibility. The silence is heavy but patient. His gloved fingers hover over the shelf where her final project drawings still lean, yellowed with age. He doesn't touch them yet. He simply studies the room, listening. The faint hum of distant traffic, the soft rustle of a loose shingle outside, the subtle creak of the structure adjusting to the late afternoon chill all gather around him. For a moment, it feels like the house might speak. But it doesn't. Instead, a ghost of the past lingers in the air. That quiet October morning, the discovery, the confusion, the unanswered questions. Mariel Caden, organized, attentive, quiet, brilliant, remains a shadow caught between what was known and what was missed. The scene stands unchanged. Yet Hale knows one thing with sharp, unmistakable certainty. Something here is wrong, something he failed to see. And for the first time in years, the silence feels like it holds direction. Case reopens due to discovery of new crucial evidence. The file resurfaced not through design but through an administrative shuffle, a warehouse audit, a misfiled box, a routine movement of archived documents. Hale received it in a stack of case summaries to review for closure recommendations, expecting to sign off on it like dozens before. But inside the folder lay something that had not been there in 1988. A single-color photograph, neatly sealed in a transparent sleeve. The image captured the far corner of Mariel's studio, a section previously deemed irrelevant and barely noted in the early investigation. In the photo, a portion of the wall near the baseboard appeared subtly off, a slight indentation where the plaster bowed inward. barely visible unless one knew to look. A small, hairline crack arced above it like a faint thread. Someone at some point decided this detail mattered enough to preserve. But there was no notation, no signature, no date, no explanation as to who added the photograph or why. When Hale first saw it, he felt a slow pull in his chest, recognition layered beneath something colder. He studied the indentation, the angle, the proximity to the drafting table, the fact that it was captured intentionally, deliberately, with focus on a part of the room dismissed decades earlier. This could not be an accident. The photo's presence alone suggested the possibility of overlooked activity, a structural pressure point, or something introduced, removed, or concealed, something small enough to hide behind the patterns of an orderly workspace, yet purposeful enough to matter. He sat motionless for a long moment after finding it. Then, without ceremony, he reopened the file. Paper rustled like brittle leaves as he spread the documents across his desk. Old reports, statements, sketches of the scene, evidence logs, all pristine in their tidiness, all equally quiet. He placed the new photograph atop the pile. It disrupted the symmetry immediately. Hours later, he returned to the old studio. The indentation was still there. Time had not repaired it. In fact, time had made it clearer. The plaster slightly collapsed inward. When he kneeled beside it, he detected the faint outline of something rectangular beneath the surface, a hollowed-out space or a hidden structure behind the wall. He ran a gloved hand along the crack. The material flexed more than it should. The last investigator himself had missed this. A quiet sigh left him. He retrieved a small penlight, shining it along the seam where wall met baseboard. Dust glimmered in the narrow beam like suspended particles of memory. He traced the arc of the crack, trying to align the indentation with Mariel's final outline. Something here had been altered, or hidden. The new evidence forced the case open again, not because it promised clarity, but because it exposed another unanswered question. And unanswered questions have gravity. Hale made the call to reopen the cold case formally. His voice was controlled, concise. Reevaluation needed, additional detail found, returning to scene. A pause on the other end of the line, then a quiet understood. He did not mention guilt. He did not mention regret. He did not mention the sinking weight of knowing a crucial detail might have escaped him years earlier. His report read simply, "New information identified, case reopened." Behind the official phrasing, another truth settled into place, the sense that the past had waited for him to return. Investigator examines past reports to identify overlooked details. Hale spreads the archival documents across a long table in the small review room, its overhead light casting precise shadows across each page. The air smells faintly of cardboard, toner, and the invisible residue of folded years. He begins with the first report. 1988. Scene conditions normal. Temperature moderate. Victim found near workspace. No sign of struggle. He reads each line slowly, letting the words settle with deliberate weight. He doesn't rush. He treats every detail as if it might shift under close examination. A margin note by his younger self catches his eye, a brief remark. Wall intact, no disturbance. He studies it with quiet scrutiny. His pen taps once on the table. Had he simply accepted the room's apparent order? Had he assumed too quickly that a neat environment reflected a neat truth? He moves next to the witness statements. Neighbors, colleagues, a supervisor. Their words are brief, practical, restrained. She was quiet, focused, no conflicts that I knew of. Always worked late, kept to herself. Minimal details, no visible tension, no sign of external issues. He studies the timeline again. Mariel's last confirmed activity, leaving the design office at 6:42 p.m. calm weather, short drive. Arrived at her studio around 7 p.m. lights seen on by 7:15. Lights off by 10, according to a neighbor's observation from across the narrow lane. No one reported unusual sounds. He flips a page. A single early note stands out. Victim sketches organized by project stage. He scans the photographs, the angles, compositions, shadows. But now, with the added detail of the indentation, the images feel incomplete. His gaze returns to the ones capturing the wall adjacent to the crack. There is a faint difference in lighting, depth, alignment, subtle enough to overlook in the moment, obvious in hindsight. He leans back, letting the silence of the room stretch. Mariel was meticulous, every drawing straight, every tool aligned. A single off-center variable would have stood out to her, so why did she not correct it? Or did she notice something? Did she approach the wall? Did something happen because of it? Hale's hand hovers over a page listing personal belongings found in the room. Among them, a small notebook ruled with clean handwriting. He flips to the final pages. The last entry is half finished, a sentence broken mid-thought. The alignment here feels nothing else. No context, no continuation. Just a pause frozen in ink. He stares at the fragment for a long moment. In the quiet, he imagines her sitting at her desk, writing, hesitating, perhaps glancing at the wall, noticing the slight bow, the subtle shift. Something about that final line resonates with the indentation, like two separate threads gently pulling toward the same point. He returns to the new photograph, placing it beside the notebook. The proximity of the wall to her desk, the angle of the indentation, the unfinished sentence. Together, they form a silent pattern. Not a revelation, not yet, but a subtle direction. He continues reading. Footprints, none unusual. Fingerprints, consistent with the victim. Door locked from inside. Window secured. No signs of intrusion. But the hollow behind the wall suggests another possibility, not an entry but a concealment, a hidden compartment, a removed item, something stored or extracted without visible disruption. He scans the early sketch of the room's layout. The wall in question appears nearly central to Mariel's working space. She must have looked at it every day. So why was it overlooked in 1988? Hale closes his eyes for a moment, letting the details drift into alignment. The old case is no longer still. Its pieces have begun to stir. Something in this room, in these papers, in this forgotten indentation, waited decades for a second glance. And now, under the steady glow of the review room light, the overlooked edges begin to sharpen. The new indentation detail forces Hale to construct a completely fresh suspect list, one no longer shaped by the assumptions of 1988. The original file had identified only 3 individuals with any measurable proximity to Mariel Caden. This time, he widens the net. Quietly, methodically, without dramatic interrogation or sweeping confrontations, just slow, steady inquiry. He begins by revisiting the 3 initial names. 1. Evan Rourke, neighbor across the narrow lane. A carpenter who worked irregular hours, known for the late-night clatter of tools. In 1988, he reported seeing Mariel's studio lights turn off around 10. His statement had always seemed neat, practical, delivered with the calm matter-of-factness of someone used to observing structural details. Hale replays a fragment of that old exchange captured on tape, Evan's voice steady, unemotional. "Didn't hear anything, just saw the light go dark." No hesitation, no strain. Hale revisits Evan now, decades later. The man is older, slower in movement, yet carries the same quiet demeanor. The conversation is soft, brief. "Remember the night?" Hale asks. A pause. "Mostly the dark," Evan replies, almost apologetic. The quiet was the same as usual. No new detail, no shift in tone, just the same steady monotone. The man remains a possibility only in proximity. But proximity alone is never enough. To Lisa Trent, colleague from the design office. She and Mariel had worked on parallel projects, not directly collaborative, but close enough to exchange occasional draft notes. Her 1988 statement had emphasized Mariel's independence, her strong preference for working alone. When Hale calls her for a follow-up, her voice carries the brittle softness of distant recollection. Mariel was focused, careful, always thinking ahead. "Any disagreements?" Hale asks. A pause. "Not really, nothing that mattered." But the faint hesitation in her tone leaves a thin ripple in the air. Lisa presents no overt motive, yet Hale senses a quiet tension underneath, the subtle undercurrent of competitive environments where small frictions grow in silence. Still, it is thin ground. No evidence, only potential. 3. Alan Durrell, landlord of the property. In 1988, he had insisted on Mariel's reliability. Rent paid on time. Studio kept in perfect condition. He'd noted only that she worked late hours. His 1988 file contained the phrase, "tenant respectful, no concerns." Hale rereads that sentence now. It feels overly crisp, as if crafted for clarity rather than truth. When Hale visits him decades later, Alan stands in the doorway, posture stiff. "Still about that," he mutters. "Just confirming old details," Hale replies. Nothing to confirm, she was good, quiet, never a problem. But Hale senses a shift, a carefulness in Alan's voice that wasn't in the old tape, a small guardedness. Yet without evidence, it's only observation. And observation alone cannot propel the investigation. The 3 original suspects remain possibilities, but none strong. None carry the weight of motive. So Hale widens the frame. 4. Dean Averill, structural engineer, who consulted on several of Mariel's restoration proposals. His name appears once in an archived office memo. A brief meeting 2 weeks before her death. Nothing in the case file indicates he was ever interviewed. A small oversight from the early investigation. Hale calls him. The man answers with a voice shaped by long practice in precision. "I remember her," he says, "sharp eye for structural alignment." "Anything unusual during the meeting?" Hale asks. A pause long enough to feel intentional. "She questioned a measurement I provided." "Was she correct?" Another pause, softer this time. "Yes." Regret, annoyance. Hard to tell. Dean's responses are neutral, but neutrality can sometimes be a mask. Still, there is no clear connection between a disputed measurement and a death. Only a quiet thread. 5. Naomi Kell, friend from university days. Her name appears only in Mariel's personal notes, early pages referencing shared classes and design critiques. Hale reaches her by phone. Her tone carries distant warmth. "She always noticed small things others didn't," Naomi says. "Angles, shadows, little shifts." "Did she mention concerns near the end?" he asks. A pause, only that her current project felt off. A faint echo of the unfinished notebook line. The alignment here feels. This detail holds weight, not heavy but persistent, a soft pulse in the background. Hale adds Naomi's remark to the growing web of subtle cues. Yet none of the suspects offer a decisive direction. No explosive conflict, no overt motive, only quiet human intersections, each carrying small shadows. Still, Hale knows that cases like these rarely pivot on dramatic acts. They hinge on subtle decisions, overlooked tensions, quiet motives that grow in the dark. As he organizes the notes, one truth becomes clear. The wall indentation is the thread. Each suspect now becomes someone who might know something about structures, alignments, proximity, or the quiet spaces behind walls. Someone connected not by force, but by familiarity. Someone who understood the room well enough to hide something in it. And as Hale considers this, the list begins to shift, not wider, sharper. Clues emerge slowly, linking inconsistencies to emotional conflicts. The investigation moves not with speed but with steady, deliberate gravity. Hale revisits the indentation with a small set of tools, working quietly so the space isn't disturbed more than necessary. He applies gentle pressure along the crack, listening for resonance behind the plaster. A hollow thud. Then another. Something behind the wall. Not large, not heavy, but present. He marks the area lightly, no cutting yet, not until he understands more. The next clue arrives through documents, an office ledger showing that 2 weeks before Mariel's death, she had requested building material samples. Specifically, plaster variations, density measurements, and structural profiles of older homes in Crestwood Valley. The request appears simple, professional, routine. But Hale senses another layer. She was researching walls. He flips back to her notebook, the unfinished sentence, the slight shift in handwriting pressure near the end, a faint impression of hesitation. Something she intended to explore. Something she sensed. He moves next to reviewing her architectural sketches. Most of them are precise, clean representations of historical buildings, but several contain faint diagonal lines in corners, lines out of alignment with the rest of the structure. When Hale overlays them mentally with the indentation in her studio wall, a connection flickers into view. She had noticed irregular alignments in more than just her projects, patterns. Something consistent. Something small. And she documented them quietly, maybe unsure of their meaning. The next clue arrives from an unlikely angle, a brief line in Evan Rourke's first statement. He mentioned hearing soft tapping a few days before her death. He attributed it to Mariel's work. But now, in the context of the indentation, the tapping takes on new weight. Tapping behind a wall. Someone installing, removing, hiding. Or checking structural integrity for a possible cavity. Hale notes it. And another thread emerges. In Lisa's old statement, she said Mariel had a habit of not rushing things. But in her new conversation, Lisa mentioned something different, that Mariel seemed restless in her final week. A contradiction. Small but sharp. Conflicting perceptions of her emotional state. People do not change from calm to restless without reason. Especially someone as methodical as Mariel. Hale marks this down. Then a final, unexpected detail surfaces. A short email from Dean Averill to the design office sent 3 days before Mariel's death. Its tone is technical, focused on structural calculations. But one line stands out. Tell her the correction she pointed out wasn't crucial, but if she insists, She can review the alignment herself. A dismissive tone, not aggressive but minimizing. Mariel was right about the measurement. She noticed structural inconsistencies, and she took them seriously. Suddenly, the clues begin to form pressure. Alignment, measurements, indentations, tapping, a shift in emotional state, a hollow space behind a familiar wall. None of this points to violence in the traditional sense. No forced entry, no physical struggle, but rather a conflict rooted in something quieter, tension over accuracy, over details, over something she discovered. A detail someone else needed to keep hidden. Not rage, not impulse. A motive rooted in precision. The clues now feel connected, not by drama, but by quiet friction, the type that grows when small truths threaten to surface. Hale returns to the indentation, runs his light across it again. The hollow behind the wall feels less like a mystery and more like a statement, something stored, something removed, something that changed the alignment just enough for Mariel to notice. And that might have cost her life. Unexpected twist reveals the least suspected person as killer. The breakthrough comes not from confrontation, but from pattern recognition. Hale sits at his desk late into the night, re-examining the suspects. Evan too distant, Lisa uncertain but without proximity, Naomi connected emotionally, not structurally, Dean technical tension but minimal access, Alan consistent presence but no clear motive. He pushes the files aside, lets the silence settle. Then it arrives, not a revelation but a quiet shift. The landlord. Alan. The one who always emphasized her reliability. The one who claimed everything was never a problem. The one who had access to the studio at all hours, who conducted maintenance, who understood the internal structure of the building better than anyone. Not dramatic, not volatile. Just present. Consistently. And something else, a detail Hale overlooked for decades, Alan's background in renovation work before becoming a landlord, a small note in an old property record. He knew walls. He knew cavities. He knew how to conceal something with precision. Hale reviews Alan's interview again, the guarded tone, the stiffness, the desire to keep the past closed. Then the final piece clicks. 3 months before Mariel's death, Alan filed a permit request for structural adjustments to the same property block, work that was never completed, never inspected, and never noted in the initial investigation. A hollow behind a wall. A change in alignment. A covered cavity. Access, skill, proximity. Motive rooted not in emotion, but in necessity, hiding something in the building that Mariel unknowingly discovered. Not rage. Not impulse. Just quiet, meticulous concealment. And when Mariel noticed the misalignment, she became a risk. A small risk. But enough. Alan becomes the quiet shape, finally emerging from decades of dust. The one no one suspected, because he presented nothing dramatic. Just a stillness that hid intention. The truth settles not with spectacle, but with the quiet click of understanding, the small, precise alignment of facts that once drifted without shape. It arrives without triumph, without fanfare, without any cinematic swell. It arrives like the slow closing of a long-open file. When the cavity behind Mariel's studio wall is finally opened, the discovery is understated. A narrow compartment, dust weighing down its edges like aged breath. Inside lies a single item wrapped in yellowed cloth, a thin metal box, unmarked, cold to the touch. Hale lifts it gently, as if it carries the fragility of the years around it. He unwraps the cloth piece by piece, revealing the contents as the light catches on their edges. Inside the box are folded documents, property records, renovation plans, a set of structural diagrams stamped with the name Alan Durrell. And beneath them, an unfiled permit request from 1988, signed in quick strokes, indicating unauthorized adjustments to several units across the property block. The diagrams detail structural changes that were never disclosed, small alterations to wall cavities, beam spacing, and foundational supports. Each one subtle enough to avoid immediate detection. Each one significant enough to violate inspection laws. Hale reads through the pages slowly, methodically. The papers carry no confession, no overt admission, just numbers, angles, and quiet evidence of someone modifying buildings without oversight. Mariel, meticulous as she was, had noticed alignment inconsistencies in her studio, perhaps the same inconsistencies these diagrams now reflect. She had started connecting the measurements, not out of suspicion, but out of professional instinct. The inconsistency in her wall wasn't dangerous, but it was irregular, a discrepancy that hinted at something hidden behind the plaster, a discrepancy that aligned, in its quiet way, with the clandestine diagrams folded in the box. She wasn't meant to discover it. She wasn't investigating anything. She was simply doing her work. The conflict wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. It wasn't born of argument or sudden volatility. It was rooted in something even smaller, the risk that her precision would expose someone else's concealed decisions. Alan's quiet presence in the community, his image of reliable maintenance, his calm distance, all of it had provided a kind of camouflage. He blended into the small routines of property upkeep. He was trusted, known in passing, hardly noticed beyond the exchange of keys, notes, repairs. But behind that stillness was the reality of undocumented structural changes, shortcuts taken quietly, adjustments made without approval, choices made not out of malice, but out of expedience. When Hale interviews him one last time, there are no raised voices, no accusations, no sudden confessions. Only quiet. Hale sits across from him, the metal box placed carefully on the table between them. Alan's eyes fall on it, the slightest tremor of recognition flickering beneath the surface. Not fear, not shock, just acknowledgement, the quiet kind a person has when they recognize something that has waited too long. "You understood the building well," Hale says softly. "The walls, the cavities, every detail." Alan doesn't answer immediately. His breath settles into a slow, measured rhythm. "She noticed," Hale continues, "the alignment, a shift you didn't expect her to see." Still no dramatic reaction, just a faint tightening at the corners of Alan's mouth. "It wasn't intentional," Alan finally murmurs, voice low. "Not that outcome." There's no further elaboration, no attempt to reshape the truth, no insistence on innocence or guilt, just a statement carried by the weight of long-held silence. Hale doesn't press him for more. The details will be documented elsewhere. The mechanical process will unfold through its usual channels, reports, hearings, legal proceedings, all of it clinical, procedural. Justice, once it begins, no longer moves with emotion, only direction. When Hale leaves the interrogation room, the corridor feels colder. Not uncomfortable, just hollow, as if the air has scooped itself around the edges of things left unspoken. He walks slowly, the floor's quiet echoes following him toward the exit. Outside, the sky is a muted gray, a soft wash of color above Crestwood Valley, the kind of sky that holds stillness without clear promise. He pauses near the building's steps, gazing down the quiet street. Leaves drift across the pavement. A distant door closes. A dog barks faintly 2 houses down. Life continuing, without ceremony, without acknowledgement of the truth that finally surfaced. He thinks of Mariel, not the victim, not the name in the file, but the person shaped through the fragments he now carries. Her precise handwriting, her careful sketches, the unfinished notebook sentence, the focus in her work, the quiet way she noticed structural shifts no one else saw. Her life had been defined by details, the belief that alignment mattered, that the small things carried meaning. And in the end, it was a small thing that untangled the silence around her death. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a chaotic event, just a single misaligned pattern. A faint bow in the wall. Something subtle enough for most people to dismiss, yet clear enough for her to sense. The truth wasn't hidden deeply. It was simply overlooked, concealed beneath the surface of an ordinary studio. And the community, shaken now by the reopening of the case, feels the tremor of learning how close the truth had always been. In the grocery store aisles, in quiet conversations on porches, in the hushed questions exchanged at the post office, all of it centers around the same uneasy realization. Someone they passed daily, someone who blended into the rhythm of town life, had carried a truth behind a calm exterior. Hale walks to his car, his steps slow, controlled. The metal box rests in an evidence bag on the passenger seat, its edges dim under the fading light. He sits quietly before starting the engine, letting the silence settle around him like it did the first day he returned to the studio. A thin breeze slips through the cracked window. It smells faintly of pine and cool asphalt. The scent is clean, grounding. He thinks about the old studio again, the dust, the stillness, the quiet air that seemed to wait. He remembers standing near the tape outline, sensing that something was wrong even before he knew what it was. He remembers the faint crack along the wall, the way the light traced it, the slight flecks beneath his glove. Details. Small details. The type that hide nothing and reveal everything. He starts the engine, the steady hum filling the car. The road ahead stretches in a straight line, empty, calm. He drives slowly, letting the motion ease him into a rhythm. Not closure, there is no clean closure in cases shaped by years of stillness, but understanding. A quiet, careful understanding. His report will read with the same clinical precision as always. Structural concealment identified. Evidence recovered, responsible party determined. But beneath those lines lies the truth he carries privately, that justice, in its mechanical way, does not always honor the human weight of what is lost. It simply moves forward, step by step, gathering details, processing facts, shaping outcomes. And yet something softer remains. A small, persistent resonance that refuses to flatten into paperwork. He imagines Mariel noticing that first shift in alignment, her brow tightening slightly, her eyes tracing the pattern, her hand recording it quietly in her notebook. He imagines her instinctive pull toward precision, the same instinct that now, decades later, led him back to the truth. The road curves gently. Hale follows it, the car's movement steady. Not victory. Not relief. Just motion. The case is solved, the truth surfaced, the silence lifted. But the emotional residue of what happened, the small tragedy born from a single misaligned detail, lingers like dust in the corners of an old room. It will stay with him. Not as guilt. Not as regret, but as a reminder. Truth doesn't always sit on the surface. Sometimes it waits behind a wall, quiet and patient, until someone finally sees the way the pattern shifts. And when it does surface, It arrives not with clarity or certainty, but with a calm understanding. The quiet recognition that even the smallest details carry weight, and that justice, for all its precision, can never fully measure the human spaces left behind.